Well, welcome to the podcast. My name is James Rowe. We've got Jasper Rose and Sleepy Harold. That's what we're just going to keep calling from right now, of Future Sox. And then Mr. Ian Eskridge of White Sox Daily. How are you, gentlemen?
Very good. How are you?
I'm enjoying myself.
I'm good as well. So thanks for having us.
Yes. And we still got a silent one. Wow.
Oh, I'm good. I mean, we're talking about the White Sox, so I can't be too excited, can I?
You can't?
It's a little...
I got to say, Ian, that's an excellent choice of hat for the purpose of today's conversation.
Hate that. I mean, the only thing that last year that I was really positive about was development of minor leagues. So it pretty much makes sense.
And Tyler Neslony, I know you're all over that.
Oh, I love that guy. Tough time at AAA, but once he finally started getting rolling, he did all right.
Well, is that going to be our future right fielder?
I kind of doubt it. Probably Colas.
Yeah, I think Colas too. Well, that's another day for another podcast. But anyways, so for our first topic of conversation, Jasper, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one since I know how you feel first and foremost. Recapping this lovely 2022 season.
Yeah, it wasn't fun, was it?
No.
I didn't have a particularly good time. I completely zoned out even towards the end of the season. It was like, I'm not even going to bother. Like this was a cluster fire. Like it was bad, man. It was obviously we kind of, at least I know, like James, you and I have talked quite a bit about this. We went into the season not expecting much after the disappointment that was the season before, being kicked out of the playoffs without any ever really standing a chance, to be honest. And not a big fan of Tony La Russa. I think I can speak for all four of us that were like, well, that shouldn't have happened. So yeah, I mean, everything that could go wrong did go wrong this season, and it was it took my love of baseball away. How about that? Like this season, watching the White Sox literally made me stop watching baseball. That's how bad it was.
I think at one point we were texting and you're like, I haven't watched in 5 weeks.
Nope, just stop watching. Why would I? And I know Ian said similar things. Like, why would I force myself to watch a product that makes me depressed? Like, I just don't want to. And Ian has and to an extent, Steve and I as well. We watch a lot of minor league baseball. We follow the minors quite a bit. Wasn't a great minor season, but it was miles more enjoyable than it was to watch the White Sox. So.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, as far as that whole thing went, pretty much. I mean, I watched the whole season, but I pretty much lost hope. I'd say probably around June, and the unfortunate thing with the White Sox last year was that they kept hanging around.
Yeah.
Had they just called it quits in June or July, it would have been great. It would have been a lot lower stress. I mean, even say had they gotten rid of TLR, like so many people were calling for mid-year, maybe the team does something. I mean, we saw it with the Phillies, ended up going to the World Series after they got rid of Girardi. So, why, I understand the egos involved in whatever, but that pretty much made it an unenjoyable, unwatchable product.
Well, and on top of that, you saw it with the Blue Jays as well, kicking out like our future bench coach early and having like a guy take over that I pretty much never heard of, who did a pretty decent job getting that team back on track. And even Miguel Cairo did it the first short while after taking over for health reasons when TLR left for health reasons. It's he even got a little bit of a fire back in the White Sox. And for a while I was like, well, maybe I should start watching again, but then too little, too late. Like it was just too little, too late. Like when the hole is that deep, it's hard to climb out of it.
And also didn't help that Cleveland just got super hot towards the end too.
They tend to do that though.
Yeah. It's a bit of a habit of theirs.
Didn't they have a 26-game winning streak a couple years ago too?
22, yeah. And then remember,
like that, yeah.
If you guys remember in 05, how close they made it too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just like even beginning that last season where, the opening day where they get walked off on, and then they kind of rebounded like right from the start. Like, okay, like, I went in somewhat as you guys did, skeptical, but then had like a winning record after what, 10 games, 9 games, and then lost 8 in a row. And like it was pretty much from that like me set the tone. I remember I was at like I think it was like the Saturday versus Tampa, like when they won. I'm like, oh, okay, so like maybe this is kind of real, like they're good. And then they proceeded to lose the next 8 games. I'm like, oh, okay, that was just a mirage. So I'm like, that's what I get for being optimistic. Like I should know better as a White Sox fan to not be optimistic, And then it was just like, I've never seen so many things just compound, like one after another, whether it's guys being injured, guys being told not to hustle because they literally are injured and playing, not being put on the injured list,
Oh yeah.
just anything TLR related where the 1 and 2 intentional walk, like just
Twice.
it was just
twice.
sleeping in the dugout in the first inning. It's like, how, like, what have we done to deserve this? Like, yeah, I thought it was just like, it got to June. Like I was very skeptical, like when May came around and they were still just middling. And even like I went back and looked from like the All-Star break last season to, I mean, obviously to the end of the season now, they like they're barely over 500. It was like a 512 win percentage. I think what I believe is the exact numbers, like 120 up and 114 down. Like this is who this team was.
Yeah.
When we saw it in the playoffs, they were just kind of like lifeless. It was just so frustrating because we're told like, all right, rebuild, here we go, like this is what it is, and then do nothing to address the holes that have been holes for how many years, and it's just one thing, it's just so frustrating. Like thankfully we had the minor leagues to kind of pay attention to, like Colson's progression, all that, because that's where I watched. Like I stopped watching unless I was physically at the game. And even there, I wasn't watching as intently. But I mean, it was just like, why pay attention to this? Like, they don't care. Why should I?
That's a good point you bring up, though. Like we talk a lot about TLR still, obviously, and I think obviously he's where it all starts and where it all ended. But there's a lot that happened in between as well. Like the injuries you bring up, Steve, is a good point. Like the fact that Tim Anderson had all these off the field issues with like all the rumors of, let's just keep them at rumors, but like having a side girl and potentially a side child somewhere. And I can fully understand that took his eye off the game a little bit, but I mean, come on, dude, don't put yourself in a situation like that. Like you're hoping that people are smarter than that. And with the same with Luis Robert getting hurt again and Eloy struggling again, being hurt again. And then Giolito coming into camp as big as we've ever seen him and just completely laying an egg. Like there's a lot that went wrong. It isn't all Tony La Russa. It is obviously the thing that we see the most because you see him sleeping and you see him the 1-2 intentional walk nonsense and all that stuff. Like it's not a good look, but a lot, like literally everything that could go wrong did go wrong this season. It was crazy.
And well, here's another factor about TLR. It's usually like a manager can cost a team 5 or 10 games or do well enough that like they improve on the team what they should be 5 to 10 games. I would say there's about at least 20 games this season where a decision was made that cost them the game. Obviously there's gonna be some here and there. It's like, okay, whatever, that happens. But including the 1-2 count, intentional walk. I mean, it's like, what are you doing? And then I think Ian, you mentioned in your podcast, like throwing Matt Foster out there 5 times in a row. It's just, it was absurd.
Made so many ridiculous decisions. And I mean, if you go to, even like the first 53 games or something like that, they had a different starting lineup.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like unbelievable. Larry Garcia in the leadoff. Like,
the 3-hole.
Yeah, and the guy had like at the time, I think he had like a negative 44 WRC plus or something like that. Like, what are we doing?
But he finished with a fantastic 39 WRC plus.
So brutal. I mean, there were, like Jasper said, there's just so like the compounding stupidity, just awful decisions, and then injuries and just basically anything that anybody could do to make sure that the White Sox lost, it was done. I mean, it was a comedy of errors. I mean, it was brutal.
And then not even just on the field. Like if you look at what Tony La Russa's influence off the field was, like this is one of the worst fundamentally sound teams that I've ever seen. And we've been through some stuff with, this franchise over the last decade or so. But these players knowing how good they can be and seeing how poorly they execute on the field, that's on your coaching staff too. And I mean, kudos to the White Sox front office for basically kicking every single coach to the curb at the end of the season, except for the one that we really all wanted to see gone.
Hey, well, outfield defense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he's still in charge of that, right? Like he's only given up base running coaching. It's Daryl Boston's still in charge of outfield, even though our outfielders keep running into each other for some reason.
Jesus, yeah.
I don't know, man.
It's called communication.
Whatever. Yeah, but okay, so that's a good thing that Pedro Grifol is hammering on that. Like we're going to communicate. So I'm kind of like excited to see if that actually materializes.
No, I will say there's somewhat of an omen I saw coming into this season before, like obviously before everything started. One of my sources in the Reds organization, he and I went out and had some drinks at this bar right across the street from Great American Ballpark, and we just got talking about baseball all in general because he actually grew up not as a Reds fan. He's from the East Coast, and he mentioned to me that there's conversations throughout baseball about La Russa. And one of the things is that game last year here in Cincinnati where he didn't know the rules.
the Liam Hendricks had to run the bases situation.
Yeah. Well, basically, he said what I had heard is that basically La Russa has this authoritative power about himself as a manager that basically everyone listens to him and only him, where everyone basically had to keep their mouth shut probably in that moment. And I think that kind of led into what happening in this season with obviously the intentional walk or whatever mind-boggling, stupid decision that even a fan can be like, what the hell? I mean, we even had a fan tell La Russa, send Adam Engel out there to pinch run. And he's like, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and then after the game, he says, I didn't hear him. No. Sure, buddy.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe.
There's a chance he was asleep, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be hard of hearing. I don't know.
Yeah, it was pretty late. It was like the 8th inning or something.
Yeah.
He might have figured.
I was surprised he was still up. Yeah. Way past his bedtime. Jeopardy had been over for an hour. So
Bingo's next.
Oh my God.
But I think honestly we probably could speak a little bit more in a sense of how angry we are about that season. But let's think about this more positively.
No, I was gonna say there's plenty more to be angry about with this organization, but I like your style here.
I'm trying to do a segue that will be a little bit more positive. And I think honestly, I'm gonna let Harold take this one. The Pedro Grifol hire. One thing that during that first search we were like, we got to get AJ Hinch and someone who's analytical, and of course we got someone who's the antithesis of it. But now Han has got his guy. I mean, yes, we all wanted Joe Espada or even Matt Quattraro, however we pronounce his last name. But we still got a guy who is analytical, and he seems to be, in my opinion, a really good hire.
Yeah, I mean, going through the process, at least this time, they seem to do an actual managerial search rather than, coming from upstairs, this is who you're going to hire, and that's it. So the start, or the search, I should say, was already, miles better than what it had been. For Grifol specifically, I mean, like I saw his name come up, I didn't know much or anything about him, but and then like you're based on what they said, what Rick had mentioned, successful organization, this and that, winning culture, blah blah blah. You see that, and then you see Royals, and depending on your definition of recent, it may or may not add up. But after the hire was made, and then the presser goes, you know, Griffo is impressive, and that's like you can't really deny that. Like he's very analytical. He said there's going to be an emphasis on analytics, getting players to understand, you know, the specific metrics that apply to them, getting players to practice hard and play hard, holding players accountable, and, you know, to be focused throughout practice games, you know, whatnot. Bringing in like we had touched on before, a mostly new coaching staff. I was cool with keeping around Ethan Katz and Kurt Hassler. Personally, I think they did a good job. You know, you can't pin everything on them for, you know, some success failures, but I think they did pretty well. You know, we touched on Devo. Why is he here? What does he even do? But you know, for me personally, I'm really looking forward to seeing how he you know, holds himself through spring training and like through the early parts of the season. Like he's saying all the right things right now, which is a 180 from what we had at the last managerial hire. So, you know, I want to be optimistic. I think having a new, younger voice that can relate to, especially the Sox are a big, at least the offensive core is like a Latin team, so he can kind of understand and, you know, and go relate to them more than, let's say, an octogenarian could. So I'm just excited to see like where it goes.
And the fact that he's come up through the minor leagues like he's been a minor league farm director. He's worked in the minors for years, did some managing, some coaching there, eventually made it up to the big leagues with the Royals. This is a guy who is known to be able to work with young guys. And that is something that we really need on this team. We need anytime La Russa got a young guy, like, okay, so someone needs to be called up and replace this injured guy. So we'll call up whatever, Romy Gonzalez, or we'll call up, you know, whoever it was. And then they don't play because Tony La Russa thinks, well, you need to earn your spot on the team. And so these guys go back down, and then either like they succeed or they don't. Like Lenin Sosa is another good example of
a guy like Lurie earned it.
Yeah, no, exactly. But of course. So that's
he had a homer in the playoffs. That's why.
That's right. Yeah. And he might get us Nelson Cruz on the team. But all right, that's a different story for another time.
Yeah.
But the
7 years too late.
Yeah. But the fact that now we have a guy who hopefully is able to rely on younger guys a little more, able to motivate them in a better way, because he did that with the Royals. Like everyone's talking about what he did to, like, when Sal Perez came up and he turned him into a star. But there's more examples of young guys on the Royals who were called up and relied upon, who all say the same thing. Like, this is a guy who can relate to these guys, to these young kids. And if we're going to be faced with a situation where we're having guys like Oscar Colas in right field, to turn it to the minors a little bit, and maybe perhaps Lenin Sosa back, because let's face it, Lenin Sosa had a fantastic season last season. And like, he looks like he could be ready to play second base in the major leagues. As far as I'm concerned, like, why not? Like, but motivate him. Give him a shot. Yeah. Don't put him on the bench and let him rot on the bench as a young guy who did nothing but absolutely rake in the minors.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much where I've been. I kind of have assumed that it's going to be an in-house second base option this season. I mean, with the quote unquote limited resources that are available, you know, I don't see how you can allocate any of the resources that they do have left to second base and expect to get anything that's going to be anything above, you know, like a 1-WAR player, 2-WAR player. You know, I mean, it's, you know, if you want at least looking for a, you know, at least like a pseudo decent floor and a high ceiling, Lenin Sosa and Romy Gonzalez are probably the best options that you have in house that aren't going to cost you anything. And that seems to be what they're looking for as far as that goes for a solution, you know? So
another upsetting thing, of course, these winter meetings. But
well, that's going to be our next topic in a bit, but Yeah, I mean, I think everyone was just like, who? Who is this guy? And I think when we actually looked and delved deeper into his resume, there was something more impressive. And I think he'll relate to a guy like Tim Anderson, who is the leader on now the new de facto leader on the team. And then obviously with Luis Robert or even what you just mentioned, Oscar Colas, it's going to be interesting to see what he can get out of the players. There's going to be some growing pains, obviously, since being a new hire, but at the same time, look how it worked for, I think, like Jasper, I think you mentioned it with Toronto. What happened there? Plus, ironically, we're getting that guy who was fired as the bench coach who is analytical. So I think that's also going to help Grafal there too. Just like having two guys go back and forth and say, hey, okay, let's make this decision. I think this is the right one.
Should we talk about our new hitting coach? Since we were all like, obviously, Menachino was basically
magic.
Let's just say a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people had issues with Frank Menachino over the last season and a half.
Yeah.
But can we talk about the guy that they brought in to replace him? Because there was a lot of rumors that it was going to be Mike Tozar, his Griffol's best friend. They went to, I think, primary school together or whatever. They've grown up together. They've known each other since they're 4 years old. I don't know. Then Tozar gets brought in eventually, not as the hitting coach, but as was it a major league field coordinator?
Yes,
which is a fascinating position. There's a bunch of teams that have used one over the past years. The Mariners had one, the Pirates had one, and I mean, why not? I'm all for, more positions of more voices and more cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, in this scenario. But they bring in I forget his name, the hitting coach, the assistant hitting coach for the Atlanta Braves.
Oh, Jose Castro.
Jose Castro. Thank you very much. I was blanking on the name for a second. Yes. How do we feel about that?
He used to be with the Cubs, so I mean, it's
that
kind of
4-letter word.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, I don't know whether to be excited about it or not. I mean, obviously the Braves have had good results the last couple of years, but before that, they were decent, and he was only the assistant hitting coach down there, so I don't really know. I mean, it's like, who knows? We don't know what we're getting there. The one thing that I do, speaking of the hitting coaches, I do know that, Chris Johnson coming up is going to be a big deal. Him being the head biomechanist for the White Sox organization, which is like a non-known thing pretty much by the fan base, is that, when these guys would go down to Charlotte and work with Chris Johnson, he would put them on force plates and he would see, what exactly is going on biomechanically and tell them, what they can do with their loads and whatever, getting ready for their swings. And that's why these guys are coming back from Charlotte and looking good. So I think that, between Tosar, Castro, and Johnson, you've got 3 sets of eyes. Plus then you got Grifol there as well. I mean, you've got a bunch of different eyes and analytically based, biomechanically based gentlemen looking at these guys' swings, helping to get them going. And one of the things that Grifol was expressly credited with was positivity and motivation for Sal Perez. And those are the kind of things that this team has been severely lacking the last couple of years. So I think that the hitting coach thing, it's like it takes a village type of thing possibly, but if it yields results, hey, the more eyes on it, the better.
And all four of the names you mentioned, all have backgrounds as a hitting coach. They've all been a hitting coach or assistant hitting coach or a hitting instructor at one point or another. So I'm fine with it. I'm cool with it. I had never heard of Jose Castro before. The Braves hit a ton of home runs. So, I mean, bring him over.
He's got to do something right if that's the case.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know anything about him either, honestly. But, I think as Ian kind of touched on that, something must have been going right in Atlanta. So I'm just going to speak just as short as possible because I know, Harold, you got something to say. I didn't know much about this one, but if we got 4 sets of eyes looking on player swings, I'm all for a team effort.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I sit too. I mean, I think I'm in the same boat with everyone, is not super familiar with who he was or the track record, the resume. But, like everybody had mentioned, like came from Atlanta. They hit the hell out of the ball. So, like, okay, positive sign. Mike Tosar and Grifol with their backgrounds and, improving Sal Perez, Jorge Soler, while they were there working with those guys specifically. And even if you go a little further, Tosar with like MJ Melendez and, that new wave of Royals hitting prospects, Pasquantino, the other guy. So they have some recent successes. And then Chris Johnson, as Ian mentioned, like working with the Charlotte hitters, like when Gavin Sheets went down, like he's broke camp last year with the club and couldn't hit and couldn't really do anything. Took a trip to Charlotte and kind of came back up and, was serviceable. Like he was, hitting, well, at least at home, he was hitting again, so it's like, okay, so like these guys seem to have input, can translate it to players and then like get results from that. So rather than just like, the opposite field singles approach, spray the ball, whatever that was. So I think, yeah, I'm open-minded. Like I'm ready to see like what they can all do. And because, not everybody is able to get through to everyone. So in this case, I think it's good where you have 3-4 different guys with maybe different ways to relate to somebody. Because maybe Chris Johnson's able to relate to, Yohan Moncada better. Or, so I think having, like you guys have all mentioned, more eyes in there, more cooks in the kitchen to just kind of help everybody out to see what works, what doesn't, rather than just do this. That's what we want.
And I'm really curious to see what Tosar is going to do, actually, because that's one of the more under the radar firings of this coaching staff is the fact that Shelley Duncan was fired and wasn't replaced. Shelley Duncan, absolutely terrible at his job. We've seen that with the White Sox, but he was also fired from the Blue Jays for a reason after like 3 months of being there. And supposedly there was like some infighting going on in the coaching staff that centered around Shelley Duncan. There's a story of a Blue Jays beat writer from 1.5 years or 2 years ago that Charlie Montoyo actually got into it with Shelley Duncan, and a week later Duncan left the team for undisclosed reasons. And I tweeted it out when they hired Shelley Duncan. I thought it was the biggest nepotism hire ever because obviously La Russa being besties with Dave Duncan, his dad, and Shelley just being absolutely like what did he even add to this coaching staff? Like he was the analytics coordinator. If one thing the White Sox have done a terrible job with over the last 2 seasons, it's preparing analytically. And Tosar is apparently really, really good at that, as is Grifol. So I'm actually very excited to see how much of that Shelley Duncan role goes to Tosar as well.
Well, I mean, between just with the hiring of TLR, to even bother hiring an analytics coordinator seems like an absurd idea in the first place. So
it's counterproductive.
Yeah, it's just pretty silly.
Well, I will say one thing about with Menachino leaving. I don't necessarily think he was the problem last year because that hitting was obviously bad enough, and it's easy to pinpoint to say, oh, it was on him. And I think, Ian, you made some remarks earlier in the year saying, I don't think Menachino is totally the problem because how does a team who hit this well with, I think it was like a 750 OPS or something like that last year, and then suddenly hit so low? But I think there was that article that Ken Rosenthal it was about La Russa, and basically saying that he basically said, screw you to Menachino, we're doing things my way, where Menachino wanted to do a different approach. So I don't think Menachino necessarily was the problem last year, but I don't think he was also the solution. I think it was time to let Menachino walk, but I think Menachino gets too bad of a rep. However, what we're doing now, I think is significantly better. And I think, as Harold said, there's enough cooks in the kitchen that it should be good. However, let's hope it's not too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, had they hired Grifol right after they got rid of Renteria, I probably would have been pretty angry. But now that they got rid of TLR and replaced him with Grifol, I'd say that I'm happy and at least looking forward to seeing what comes out of it next year.
Yeah, the last coaching change we haven't discussed is Eddie Rodriguez taking over for Super Joe McEwing, who had been around for a while. Super Joe, our waving windmill of a third base coach. But
so many people said that he shouldn't have signed.
oh my God, man, he got so many people thrown out. But Eddie Rodriguez, I believe he's also former from the Royals organization, and him and Grifol go back. They worked together on the Royals like 10 years ago or something.
Yep.
So, well, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm more excited about the guy they hired. Was it from your Reds, James, the senior director of sports performance, Jeff Head?
Jeff Head, yeah.
Yeah.
Very excited about the fact that he gets to like lead this whole new like revamped medical branch they want to open more or less within the White Sox organization, because that guy's good at his job.
Yeah. No. I actually, my source was thrilled for him. That's really all I gotta say. If he's thrilled for him, I know that like the guy I talked to is so very analytical. He's like, he's gonna do wonders for you guys.
Well, it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
They certainly need it. I know that they were, the one thing that they didn't want to talk about during the Grifol Hahn press conference was that they didn't want to talk about the the health stuff that was going on, the thing that they were working on. And I'm really interested to see where this whole thing goes. And I'm almost positive that it's going to a more biomechanics based, strength and conditioning program. But, until somebody really gets their eyes on what they're doing over there, nobody's going to really know. So I'm really interested to see where it goes.
That was a funny moment during the press conference too, where Grifol was like, "So maybe we can bring up," and Han goes like, "Nope, not yet, not ready."
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like that. It's like that press conference he had with the Russo. He was just like, "Okay, let's not ask that elephant in the room question."
That was funny.
Yeah. So I don't know. There are so many positive things that are shaping up in the coaching staff and just the direction of the club. And I'm really hoping that finally somebody that has a direction for the entire organization can actually grab a hold of it and doesn't get thrown back to 3 decades ago.
Right.
And then we can finally move forward and have a team that's, rooted in at least in the, this decade or this, century. So we'll see.
Oh my God. I am just baffled that that era ever happens. But I think that's another good segue to get talking about. Now let's just get into player moves. And I'll let you.
Which ones?
There's the one so far. Actually, two. There's technically two.
Yeah, two, I guess. Yeah.
But Ian, I'll let you on this one. Obviously, this one is more about the Mike Clevenger signing, which is kind of an interesting, low-key contract. And then plus with what happened at winter meetings or lack of it.
Hey, we got Nick Avila and
Victor Reyes,
Jaquez, and Victor Reyes, yeah. So they made some big moves. But they did sign Mike Clevenger, and a lot of people are not thrilled about the signing. I will say, I hate watching him pitch. So that part of it, I get. I really I just can't stand watching the constantly moving feet thing. But
you must love Luis Garcia, then.
No, I don't. I'll concede though that Clevenger, despite he didn't have a great playoff run with the Padres so much, but as it was revealed, he had like a MCL strain, and he's basically pitching one-legged for the last 2 months of the season. And so his velocity dropped down. And so, that is what that is. But, if you get, the pre-Tommy John 2019 Clevenger, who's finally back after him missing, a couple of years. And if you even get close to that amount of, performance out of Clevenger next year, this pitching staff will be phenomenal. Now, I'm not saying that I do expect that, but, I mean, you can only, with the monetary constraints, once again, that are put on the White Sox, I think that it was probably the best move that they could possibly make for that amount of money to get that amount of, production. And I don't know, he seems like a fairly decent guy for the most part, despite that whole, COVID going out on the town thing with Plesac.
Oh yeah, was it? It was. It was in Chicago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in Chicago.
Yeah, Guardians ran him out of town for that over that. Like he was not well liked anymore after that. So
Yeah, well, having the guy coming back from leukemia or whatever on the club, that would probably raise some red flags, I suppose. But I mean, all things considered, he's a really nasty pitcher if he can come back. And people were a lot of people that I saw on White Sox Twitter were complaining that oh, well, you're getting a guy coming back from Tommy John surgery and he only pitched 120 innings. I'm like, well, stop me if you heard this before. Guy coming back from Tommy John looks only okay after in his first season back after Tommy John, and then the next year comes out and pitches really well. I mean, we saw the exact same thing literally with Carlos Rodon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, if, he comes out and pitches well next year, I will 100% not be surprised. So,
counterpoint, the White Sox have a track record of signing guys who come off of injury or pitchers who are not productive in the season before because they're hurt, and then the White Sox sign him to big contracts or long contracts or $10 million a year plus contracts. Not very good. Kelvin Herrera, Joe Kelly, these guys were all known to be hurt. The White Sox took a gamble. They signed him anyway. Kelvin Herrera sucked and was out of baseball a year later. And Joe Kelly was not very good this year. And I have hopes that he comes back to more like his usual self in the upcoming season.
I think he pitched a little well down the stretch, though.
Down the stretch, he got better, yeah.
The second half was a lot better.
Yeah.
But why do we keep... I get it when you're like building on something, but this is the window. This is the competitive window. Why do you keep signing guys who are coming off of injuries that have shown to be as bad enough that they can't be productive? And I'm all for Mike Clevenger coming back. I heard the interview with Chuck Garfien the other day. Very, very good interview. I feel much better about the signing after hearing Clevenger speak. Because especially what Ian says, like the whole stuff about the injury came up, and that starts to make more sense now. But why do the Sox keep signing guys who are hurt?
It seems to be the only pool of talent that they're comfortable in, because
because they get him on a discount.
Yeah. It's mostly that, because then even initially when the signing came out, and it's okay, it's I think it was Morosi said it's expected to be more than 8 million, and then it was I think Bowden said 12, and so it's 8 with the bonus, and so that makes it 12 eventually, or maybe 2 and 20. So it's okay, that's whatever. But then you see Matt Boyd get 10 million for throwing 13 innings, and Kyle Gibson get 10 million for whatever reason. Andrew Heaney is another guy that gets, he's hurt and got 25, so it's okay, it doesn't. So the amount of money that they spent, okay, that's not as much of an overpay as you would like to think. And I know White Sox Twitter especially, we like to be mad, and given we have a lot of reason to be mad about stuff, but that was one okay, with actually seeing some of the market unfold, that made me feel a little bit better about it. And as you guys mentioned before, if I'm excited to see what Ethan Katz and Kurt Hassler are going to get to do with him, because we've seen with Rodon, with Cease, pre-bulked up Giolito, he has some successes with these starting pitchers that okay. And even Cueto, not that he's solely responsible for anything, but Cueto looked washed for a few years because he was coming off injury. That was another guy coming off injury, ineffective, and I was not expecting anything of what we saw out of Cueto this year, and like, hey, that was good. Like, I'm not mad they didn't bring him back because like I don't really see that happening again. But it was like he has some recent success stories. So if this is a guy that he targeted, because I imagine he has some input on like, hey, go after XYZ, and they got him. Like he must have a. I think he has a plan to try and get him back to maybe not quite like peak 2019 level, but hey, if it's like 80% of that, like as a fourth, fifth starter, I mean, that's good. And it's better than Vinny Velo, rounding out the rotation for, or Dallas Keuchel. Like, yeah, it's not like maybe as sexy as it would have been a few years ago, but like it's still, there's still, value. He could be a valuable piece in the rotation.
That's why I'm also intrigued by the Rule 5 pick the Sox made, because that is a kid from the Giants organization who got drafted right around the time that Katz was still with the Giants. I think Mike Rankin and James Fox mentioned that on the Future Sox podcast as well. So there's a reason they obviously targeted this kid. So let's see what he can do.
Yeah, I actually was like looking a little deeper into his numbers, and I was like, you know what, that for a Rule 5 draft pick, especially for it coming for a team that's supposedly contending, I was like, okay, that's weird they made the selection, but when you kind of look more into it, you're like, I see why.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good move. And I think honestly, the Clevenger move, I think it's going to be a good one because let's be real, it's a low risk, high reward type of deal. And if you get Clevenger being a 4-5 guy, putting up numbers close to like what Harold was saying, closer to what his 2019 numbers are, I don't see why we can't be one of the 5 best teams in baseball.
At least starting pitching wise.
Yeah, Codify had us, I think, with the top pitching, what was like the pitching war or whatever. They said that we were like the top pitching rotation in baseball. I mean, take that for what it's worth, but I don't know. It's something to hang your head on.
Most 100-mile-an-hour pitching, like pitchers with 100-mile-an-hour pitches as well, right? The Codify had us like top of the list
like
there.
Yeah, I mean,
Please.
there are definitely positives, but we'll see. The whole thing last year, the problem wasn't the pitching.
No.
So,
that's the thing. Like we can have this same pitching staff or this pitching staff doing as good or better as the one from last season. It doesn't matter if you don't field the ball. It doesn't matter if you don't score runs. You cannot keep piling this pressure on these pitchers to always bullpen guys always having to pitch with extremely narrow leads or with extremely high tense situations. Like you cannot keep doing that. You gotta get runs on the board and take the pressure off your pitching staff, because obviously these guys are not going to be able to do that for 162 games plus a playoff series if we get there. And
they're not always going to have their best stuff game in and game out. So
just score runs.
Yeah. Pitching over errors. I mean, how many times did we see that, last year, and everybody's like, oh, so-and-so supposed to get him out. Like, yeah, like, okay, how many times do you want to keep doing it? Like, you get maybe like once, hey, you make a bad error or a bad throw. Okay, like I got you. But when it's multiple times a game, like you can't expect the pitcher to keep pitching over it. Like they make mistakes too. So it's,
especially guys like Dallas Keuchel, who was constantly complaining about the defense behind him, even though people were hitting 110-mile-an-hour rockets off of him. Like, come on, what are you doing, bro?
Yeah.
Giving 5 outs to a guy like that's allowing really loud contact doesn't generally work out very well.
Nope.
No. And I mean, regardless of how bad that defense was, I don't think the defense was the problem with Keuchel.
Nope.
No.
Certainly not.
I think it was definitely up here and definitely with his hands.
And his mouth. Like there was a problem with his mouth.
The problem's in his brain.
Yeah. If we're gonna count his mouth, we might as well count that freaking beard of his. It's just, oh my god. But winter meetings came and went, and obviously not much happened aside from the kid that from the Giants. But I think what this fan base wants is something to been proven something. Personally, for me, I was like, I didn't expect anything to come out of the meetings because I'm like, I'm sure they're still having discussions with different teams about acquiring a second baseman or right fielder or whatever. But at the same time, you know, as patient as I am, sometimes I'm like, all right, I kind of want you guys to say, what is the direction we're going to make? What are you trying to prove? And I don't know. My hope is that they go out and get a right fielder, and then obviously second base, as it's not a premium position, so they can be fine with a Gonzalez or a Sosa next year. But it also would be nice to see them, trying to get a veteran player to play second base. I'm not saying getting Josh Harrison back, but maybe a type of player like that back, just so I don't know.
Just tell us what the plan is. That's the whole thing. We are all the whole White Sox fan base is basically like that meme of the stick person with the stick poking, like do something.
Do something. Yeah.
And it's fine if you don't want to do anything. It's fine if you're just like, you've decided going into this offseason, Jerry has told Rick and Kenny, listen, we're not doing anything. Cut as much off the payroll as you can, that we are hovering around the same amount as last year. And we'll go from there. Just come out and say, listen, guys, just so you know, we're going to roll out Oscar Colas in right field. We got Lenyn Sosa penciled in at second base, and this is it. We got Clevenger. We got what we needed to do. We got an extra stopgap in the rotation, and these are the guys that are going to have to do it. But stop, with this. We're in this no man's land right now. Like, no one knows what the plan is. And then there's a guy like Jerry Dipoto. There was an interview with Jerry Dipoto the other day who literally tells everyone, if you ask him in the grocery store, like, hey, what are the plans with the Mariners? He will tell you exactly what the plan is with the Mariners. And here we are faced with a front office that still has the whole super mysterious under the radar vibe. Stop it. Just tell us this is what it's going to be. And then we are all either super mad for 2 days or we are all super happy for 2 days, and we can move on and start focusing on spring training. But because nothing is happening and we don't know what the plan is, we don't know what the direction of this organization is, we're all getting more upset.
Right.
And then you cancel FanFest or Sox Fest or whatever. And then there's a whole, it keeps piling up.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too. It goes back to the whole comments from Rick, however many years ago. The money will be spent, seat at the table. We're going to be in for premium players,
see you at the parade.
See you at the parade, like all that. And then we're at that point where it's supposed to be happening. Like, okay, we're here, and we can't throw money at the problem. Like, well, we're not going to be in on this guy because we're at a budget, and now we have to trade from some poor spending. We've spent too much on the bullpen or utility guys or depth infielders or whatever it is. It's like, well, now how can you expect us to spend our way out of it? It's like, well, you're the one who spent your way into it. Like, you did this. And we were sold the bill of goods saying why can't we get these guys? And now you're saying, why do you think we could get these guys? It's, we've been literally bait and switched by them. And then, even today, I guess Bruce Levine was on the score, blaming fans for not going, why the team can't afford anybody. This is they've done this however many times where they blame us for, it's your fault that you don't show up more. It's like, why would we keep showing up? You've given us no reason. You've given us in 40 years of just incompetence, 40 plus years of incompetence. And hey, you lucked into a World Series once. Great. We're excited. We love that. But you've done nothing to have any sort of backbone, or just you've done nothing to have a benefit of the doubt. You've just failed and failed and failed, and it's okay for you guys to keep failing. But when we reciprocate, why would we support this? Oh, now it's, well, how are we supposed to do anything? They cleared $2 million for fans. It's not a super high number, but that's a number where I think they have to start paying on the lease. So maybe that's why they're not spending, is because they have to spend money on the stadium, the lease part. It's all of it's dumb. It's just super dumb, and we missed the window for the cost controlled, not even cost controlled, but Machado and Harper, those contracts. Look at them now. What are Xander Bogaerts? Just any of these dudes, Trey Turner, all these guys are those contracts. Looking back, Harper should have been here for 13 and 330. That makes sense. It filled the hole, and you just did nothing. You just sat there, did nothing, and then, oh, I got my sunglasses on because of the shock in my eye. Shut up, man. You did nothing. Yeah. You have no reason to oh, we're shocked that our terrible offer didn't get accepted. Like, we're not. You just have a pattern of doing this.
Yeah, well, and here's the other thing. Like I've noticed over the years that the Sox have had the willingness to contend and they want to win. The problem is they consistently going after these bad contracts or going after players who are like Jeff Keppinger, and Adam.
Mark Tian.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I'm fine that you guys are wanting to become contenders, but why are you going after these guys? I mean, Adam Dunn, I guess I saw why, but
I was super excited when they signed him.
yeah,
Like
me
when
too.
that signing, I was like, yeah, the guy's gonna hit 600-foot home runs and he's gonna bang out 75. Let's go. Like,
Yeah, and it
When-
has the historically worst season of all time for
Yeah.
a batter or something
Yeah.
like that. But
I remember
mean,
when he walks out. Do you remember this when he walks onto the field after his press introduction? Adam Dunn. This is just a blast from the past, and he looks over to the right field porch and he goes like, "Has anyone ever hit it all the way up there?" And then it said, "No one ever has." And it's oh yeah, I was so pumped. I was like, "Yeah, man, go do it."
though I will say the one good signing that was under the radar, believe it or not, it was Juan Pierre.
Yeah.
I really thought he was solid, but like that 1 year
We're
where
talking about what 12 years ago, 14 years, however long it was. Like,
I
it's,
know. And then like I still one of my all-time favorite ones, and I was just kind of chalking my head, or like even when I was still not really all that smart about baseball, is probably the best way of putting it, is that move for Andrew Jones. I was like, why? The guy has been on a decline. You're going to put him as a rotational DH guy? I don't see this working out. And
that was right about the era that the Sox started cycling in and out like over the hill superstars. We got Ken Griffey, we got Andrew Jones, we got Manny Ramirez.
Kenny
legend
always
of
gets
Manny.
his man.
Kenny always gets his man. You got that right.
Evan
Hey,
Youkilis.
Youkilis. That's right. Yeah.
He was good for like a month, and then he
Yeah.
sucked. You know.
Yeah.
But so was Matt Latos. So
That is
Yeah,
my
yeah.
god,
Yeah, there's
man.
that.
Pain.
Yeah, it's just,
oh no, James Shields.
but-
He got James Shields.
Oh yeah, well let's not talk about that.
yeah, that was
but
that was
to-
the deal.
To latch on to what Steve just said about like the whole situation where you're not spending the money and not telling us what to do with it. Jose Abreu, we should probably drop that name in this like general
Mhm.
conversation.
I think it's very important to drop his name, but yes, go ahead.
I agree with the decision to not sign Jose Abreu, certainly for the money he ended up in the years he ended up getting with the Astros. But the way they went about the whole situation, being non-communicative about it, being like it's not the way to sell your fan base on the decisions you're making. Because I understand from a business perspective, there was no way in my mind they were going to re-sign Jose Abreu because he has no spot on the team. If you indeed want to start moving guys like Vaughn and Sheets out of the outfield where they don't belong, he is old. Let's be honest, with all due respect, old baseball player, and he wanted 2 or 3 years for a lot of money. I would not have given him that either. But you got to sell your fan base on why you're making decisions. You got to tell us why you're not re-signing him. Give us a clear path and a destination where you want to end up, and we're not getting that.
yeah, I think the whole thing boils down to exactly that: his age and the amount of money, and the fact that you've had Vaughn ready to go, for a few years, and then you end up sticking him and Sheets both in the outfield, which, I mean, that's neither of their faults that they were put in the outfield, but what an awful chain of events that whole thing was. I mean, just a bad idea in general.
The two slowest outfielders playing in right field. Though I will say between the two of them, I guess Sheets looked the most competent. I don't know. I mean, they were playing out of position, and that's another thing. Like, yeah, I understand that you're trying to go offense first, and usually offense. If you score a lot of runs, the whole committing 3 errors every game will maybe hurt a little bit, but not totally. But it severely backfired, and look what it's cost. Look what it's done. It, as much as I would have liked to have a Abreu back, I think Jasper, you made a good point about the age and everything. But same point, one thing I would have done, I would have just traded Sheets for something, maybe a second baseman, and had Abreu be the DH. Now we need a left-handed bat, so I understand why they kept.
We
him.
also need Aloy to DH, so because he can't play the outfield.
Exactly, and there's all these little things that they put themselves in this position, and they have no one to blame but themselves.
Yeah,
I
and I mean
don't.
that's a roster construction issue. Is really what it is. Is when you litter a team with 4 to 5 first base DH types, and then you're shocked when they can't play other positions. Like, whose fault is that? Like, everybody, like, I mean, there are certain sectors of the fan base, like, oh no, Vaughn's fine out there, or Sheets is fine out there. It's like nothing agrees with you or your assessment. Like, because there are statistically like two of the worst outfielders. Like, yeah, maybe Sheets was a little bit better, but like he wasn't good. Like he's got a better arm, maybe. I don't know. Like it's still just bad, and that's a roster construction thing. And like Eloy can't play out there without seemingly getting hurt, and like, oh, he got hurt running the base. Well, like whatever, I don't know. He needs to be a DH. He needs to see less time in the field. And like going back to the Abreu thing, it's like you have all these square pegs you've been trying to jam in, a round hole, and it made, like in Jasper, like you said, it made a business sense that he wants a lot of money. He's getting up there in years, and like he's literally not under contract. Like that was your out, is he's not under contract. You don't have to pay him. And like I get it that it stinks that like you have to let your franchise icon go, who your most productive offensive player for the last decade, 9 years, like under these circumstances because of a poor constructed roster. But like you have to do something. You have to get either younger guys into their natural positions, and like while this sucks, like if you were going to bring them back, like okay, then you have to trade your young cost control guys to fill these other needs and pay more for a first baseman. Like when it just, like if the Sox, even going back to the winter meeting, like their offseason stuff, if they had been more clear or open about like we're not bringing Jose back, but these funds are going to be used to fill our other needs. Like if they had said or had brought in like we spent 15 to 20 million on a left fielder or a right fielder, like, or use some, like had they reallocated the money properly into a position of need, then it makes more sense. But you still have one outfielder on the roster, and whatever you want, like Leary Garcia, he stinks too, but like that's like is he your second baseman? Is he your left fielder? Like right now, it's like you still have these glaring issues you're just not addressing, and you let your franchise icon go because of the poorly constructed roster. It's just all this stuff just compounded. Again, it's just they've made their own mess and then have to lie in it, and then are just like, well, we can't do it. How could we possibly get out of this? It's just so backwards,
And Jose is going to do great for Houston. I think he's going to be a fine baseball player because he doesn't have to be the guy who carries the team. You don't want a 36, 35, 37-year-old to have to carry the offense. He carried it for the Sox this season as the lone, like consistently productive slugger. But for the Astros, he doesn't have to do that because he has Jose Altuve, he has Alex Bregman, he has all these other, like Jeremy Pena, all these other stars on the team. And in the meantime, the Astros got younger at first base and more productive because Yuli Gurriel is like 40 and he was a negative WAR, I think, this season.
It was terrible.
So, yeah. So they get younger, as and weird better as that sounds, since you're dealing with a 36-year-old, and much more productive.
And a leader, and he's a leader too.
Exactly. Like, and I understand it because this is their window. They overpaid for Jose Abreu, but they are in their window. They are the reigning champions. They are like they have World Series appearance after World Series appearance. This makes perfect sense for them. It would not have made sense for the Sox.
I mean, regardless of their cheating scandal and everything,
right.
They kind of have proven that their model is what is driving success. I mean, a lot of like the Cubs were like, oh, we're gonna build a dynasty, and look how disastrous that was. And I was thinking to myself, okay, the Sox actually look like they're doing exactly what the Astros are doing, and now they're doing not exactly like what the Cubs are, but in the same trajectory.
But in the meantime, you have the Ricketts family that tell the Cubs front office, carte blanche, spend whatever you need to spend right now. Like they have basically a like daddy's Amex, and they can go buck wild and sign whoever they want to sign because the Ricketts family said, go for it. Doesn't matter what it costs. So they overpaid for Bellinger already. They got more guys coming in. It's just, I would love to have an owner that would give a credit card to the front office that goes like, hey, you know what? I want to win. Here you go. What the Padres are doing, man, I wish I was born a Padres fan, man. Holy hell.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's super exciting. But I mean, like talking about the Cubs, I mean, okay, so you're giving carte blanche and your next two steps are Jameson Tyone and Cody Bellinger.
Yeah,
I mean, sure, but
I mean, I'm just, throwing that out there.
I see what Jasper's trying to say, though.
Yeah,
No,
they're
yeah,
filling
100%.
needs at least, I suppose.
Yeah, no, 100%.
You know?
Yeah, I think the part of the problem, with the White Sox is that Rick Hahn is getting caught up in his own cliche nonsense quotes that he keeps on putting out there, and now everybody's calling him on it. And
Hahn speak.
yeah, it's like all these cliches, and none of them have come to fruition. And now everybody's like, all right, well, you said, where's the results? And there haven't been any results yet. And just the White Sox fans want results of one shape or another. If you're going to lose, go ahead and lose. But if you're going to sit here and tell us about the parade and that the money will be spent, and then literally none of that happens. I mean, yeah, okay, so the total payroll equals, almost $200 million, which has never been done before. Okay, great. But when like 45% of the money that you're spending is on your bullpen and on Dallas Keuchel
And on Lurie Garcia.
Yeah, and they're on 2-year deals. So who cares?
And I think the other frustrating aspect of it too is like, the White Sox seem to be an organization like without consequences, where, how long has Hahn been in this job? And let's be kind of frank, like not great at it, and it's just like, okay. And even like at the press conference, he's like, well, if I ever thought I wasn't the right man for the job, I would step down. Like, right. Is that what it has to take? Right. It's just like the Bulls, like the Garpax situation, like where Paxson literally had to like resign, like step down out of that one role because he wasn't going to be let go. Like he had to take it upon himself. And that's like the frustrating part is like they can kind of just keep spinning their wheels in the mud of like, oh, well, that didn't work. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. Like we'll just keep on keeping on. But, in any other organization, like there'd be consequences for underperformance or striking out on all these deals or having a DFA all your big, just these persistent issues that seem to be plaguing the team. Like other organizations would have these people in charge, these decision makers, face some sort of repercussion for this, for the missteps. But like, here we are. And I mean, like, we know, like I feel like we're all smart enough to kind of get what the issue is, like with that. It's just like, it's so frustrating. And like, just to see is like, we just know, like, it really doesn't matter because he's going to be in the job until he doesn't want it or there's new ownership. And I don't know what comes first, and like that kind of like demoralizing to think about in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's been a consistent, I think you were just saying, it's been a consistent problem with the front office, constantly making all these bad moves and being like, well, whatever. And it's like, how are you not learning from your mistakes? Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with you saying that Hahn hasn't been a good general manager. I think he's been a mixed bag. But at the same time, you make the point about he says these things, prove it to me. And he hasn't.
I like Hahn as a GM. I like him as a person. I like him as a guy who seems to really love baseball and really love his job. Like any interview that you hear with him, he comes across as someone who loves baseball and the minutia of it just as much as we all do. The problem is that as of the last couple of seasons, just look at the amount of, and Steve already touched on it, the amount of money that the Sox have had to cut by DFAing players on longer term contracts. Like you had to DFA Adam Eaton, you had to DFA Dallas Keuchel. There's talk about that they should have or will, if this trend continues, have to DFA Yasmani Grandal. There's Lurie
John
Garcia.
Danks, if you want to go back farther.
John Danks, exactly. Yeah. And Lurie Garcia, who's another candidate who should have been DFA during the season, but there's no way in hell you're going to sign a guy to a 3-year extension and DFA him 4 months into the 3-year extension, obviously. But he should have been based on his total lack of production. So if you look at all these contracts that Hahn is eventually the guy like responsible for, and you have to cut bait and still pay them out their contract, it's dead money. You're not getting any production out of them. You're paying them to go away. That's not a good recent track record. It's just not. And like, I will defend Hahn whenever I see a chance to.
That's where I've basically been. Is I kind of said like, this year, this is it for me. You know, as far as standing up for Hahn, you know, I've been the same way where I will defend him and say that he's done some really good things, but there's, you know, at a certain point, you know, you have to say, well, if you're not getting the job done here, that you're part of the problem.
Yeah, get up or get out of the way, you know, kind of thing. Like where even like the Sale trade, the Eaton trade, you know, like I think Quintana trade, like I think those were good. Like he got good talent in return, like, and for the most part, like you hit on those guys, like assuming that they, you know, can come back to their numbers, but it's just like all the supplemental stuff after, or even, you know, like that's the part that's leaving a lot to be desired. It's like, okay, you kind of have this core around, so where do we go from here? And I don't know if that's so much of if that's like a pro scouting issue, if that's, you know, because he was like, Hahn was the contract guy before kind of stepping into this role. So maybe he's more well versed into that than evaluation. I mean, that's like the part is like you really, another thing with the Sox is like you really don't know who does what and when they do what or where the influence of anything comes from. But it just gets to a point of like, all right, you've been in the position for 10 years. You have what, like 2 winning seasons, and one was a 60-game season, 2 playoff appearances, you know, how many losing records he's like, again, not all of it is his fault, but like, you know, something has to give, and like you need to, you know, you need to prove it. Like it's just to the point of like, I was, you know, in like you guys, like I was kind of a backer, and like okay, like let him see his vision, like fulfill it. It may be the Grafal with bringing in these coaches, like maybe this is more of he finally gets somewhat of his input, his vision for what he thinks the team should be, and maybe that helps. And then maybe we're back here eating crow, and like who knows? I would love to. I don't want to go through another rebuild. Like
we all would love.
It was fun when there was.
Yeah, we all would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah, and like it was fun, like going to those games with like 15,000 people, and you sit wherever you want, and like, you know, there's nobody there, and you're watching young guys. Like that kind of like is somewhat fun, but like not really. Like when they're better, it's more entertaining, and I like that. Like I'd much rather watch it on a day-to-day basis. So it's just you know, it's just more headaches. I think is really that the organization just gives me on a day-to-day basis of just the nothing burgers, or, you know, even Jerry cracking the joke after they won like that award for the ACE program, which is fantastic. Like the ACE program is great. Like there's no shit. I'm not taking anything away from that, but like, and I get it's a joke. Like you crack and you know, we didn't win too many games. Like, dude, like come on. Like this is not the time when you're saying right. Like when you're like crying poor because you have budgetary constraints and like you're just doing nothing at the winter meetings. All these talents that can actually fill holes on your roster are just going off the board, and you're just like we're straight. Like we'll sign Ben Gamel in February. You know, like okay, like whatever it is. You know, it's just kind of like just frustrating.
Yeah. And honestly, I will say this, like, it shouldn't have to take us fans to diagnose the problems and present them during the season or during the off season. Like, I know maybe not to sound arrogant, but like my background's a little unique in that sense. But, you know, for all of us, we're all smart enough to know what the problem is and we can diagnose it. So how come we're able to see it and not them? And I think this is, yeah, I don't understand it.
It's an interesting thing Steve brings up, by the way, that I want to quickly touch on, not too long, but saying that Steve just said that we don't know who does what in the front office. There was a moment where Griffol was talking about the interview process. I don't know if you guys caught on to this, but he was mentioning, so he had a first conversation with, 4 or 5 people. He had a second conversation with 4 or 5 people. And then there was a third one in Phoenix or in Arizona, I think, with Jerry. There was a name in, I think the first conversation? There were 4 or 5 people part of that conversation on behalf of the White Sox. There was a name in there that a guy I'd never, ever heard of before. Like, I understand. Okay, Hahn is there. Getz is there. Jeremy Haber, the assistant GM, is there. I get that. And there was a 4th name. And to this date, I forgot the name. To this date, I have no idea who that was. So there was a guy in the first round of interviews for a new manager who nobody knows who it is.
It's probably Katy Perry's booty hole. Let's be real.
Like, no, but yeah, but in all seriousness, that's exactly what Steve touches on. Like, we don't know who does what. There was a guy interviewing managers who we have never heard of, and we are all people who are neck deep into the White Sox organization. I've never heard of the guy. Like, what are we doing here?
Like the decision makers, it's.
Yeah, I actually had a thought as well about something that Steve brought up. When he talks about talent acquisition, and one thing that I kind of wanted to throw out there, and like part of the problem with the White Sox organization, and part of the thing, where the White Sox have been trying to, they sold off so they could tank, so they could replenish the system, and during that time, you have somebody in charge of the draft starting in 2016 with Zach Collins, and moving forward after that. And recently, that person, Nick Hostetler, was promoted to pro player personnel evaluation and talent acquisition, more or less. And those are 2 things that were lacking. I mean, is that a problem? I don't know, but it seems like it could possibly be. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be like a trend. Like, they kind of missed on those early picks. I mean, what if I don't know if he made the Fulmer pick, but
year before,
I think he was a part of, maybe. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah,
but...
no, he was like the head assistant or whatever at that time.
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
So then, so there's that. Then there's Collins, and then, Madrigal, Berger. Like, it's 2nd round pick on sheets. Like, you just wedged yourself into positionless. Like, those are like first base DH guys. Yeah. It goes back to the same thing. It's like you drafted all these bats that can't play anywhere. Like, if you're building the 16-inch softball team, yeah, they're great, but like, you're not. So,
God, I can't wait for the Sox to sign Joey Gallo for $18 million a year.
Oh no!
Oh, it's gonna be lit. Yeah, everybody's gonna love it. So.
I'm nauseous.
Yeah.
I'm also nauseous because I looked up Rick Hahn's track record, by the way. I don't know if you guys are interested in Rick Hahn's track record for winter meeting moves. You guys ready for this?
Lay it on us.
In 2014, that was the Samardzija, Melky, and Robertson year. That was a good year. That was an exciting year. That was
exciting.
That was very exciting. That was really fun. The year after, on or around the winter meetings, he acquires Brett Lawrie. Sure, okay, this was kind of like sort of peak Lawrie. Like, he was a legit like player.
I thought it was a good low-key move, honestly.
Yeah, made sense.
Yeah.
2016 is the Moncada, Kopech, Giolito, Raylo, Dunning, the Eaton sale trade, right? So, okay, perfect. Okay, good winter meetings. And then, oh my God. All right. So from 2017 on, Wellington Castillo and Jose Ruiz in 2017. Yonder Alonso, James McCann, Ivan Nova, and John Jay in 2018. And also Jordan Romano. I did not know this. The White Sox owned Jordan Romano for a hot second.
What?
I did not. Yeah.
Really? Oh.
Yep. They traded for him and immediately traded him onwards.
You learn something new every day.
We had Jordan Romano for a bit. We could have had.
Was that Rule 5?
I think that might have been Rule 5.
Because that would make sense. But okay.
But either way, they acquired Jordan Romano for a very a hot minute. 2019, Nomar Mazara. And that was also the year that we lost out on Zach Wheeler, obviously, even though we had the highest offer on the table. 2020, the winter meetings were canceled, but we still acquired Lance Lynn right around the same time. So that's a win. And in 2021, the meetings were canceled because of the strike. But that is 5 years of basically futility after the Giolito year, after the Eaton's Hill year.
And ironically, of those last years you were mentioning, the only really good move there was James McCann. And no one really expected that to be a good move.
No.
Yeah.
It's just, he was going to be a backup catcher later on down the road, and then maybe catch a year before they go off and get something bigger like they did with Grandal, but still.
Right.
Didn't work out well for the Mets.
Did
No.
not.
And that's, I don't even understand people pining to get him back. Like, I think they just think like he'll come back here and like channel that again. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I think they just kind of,
These are the
found
same
money for like a year and a half, and like, hey, that was great, and go on your way.
These are also the same
Yeah.
fans who thought that Andrew Vaughn was a better fielder than Eloy. Let's be real.
Yeah.
No. Just no.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Vaughn had to make these diving plays just to track a ball, that's all I need to say.
Yeah, he's so slow. It's incredible.
Hey, you know who's a good defensive outfielder? Joey Gallo.
Yeah.
Well, he was not last year.
Yeah,
but-
he used to be.
He
at least,
certainly
yeah.
was not. No. And also,
Well, he'd fit right in then, so.
I'm also, I'd fit right in with the strikeouts as well. So, I mean,
Mhm.
oh God,
That would
man, I'm
drive people
so
nuts
worried
if
about
they
this.
sign him.
They're gonna
And-
do it. You know,
Yeah.
they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it.
Well, I know. And then, like
Reclamation
when he goes
project.
on just a strikeout binge, like it's just gonna drive people absolutely nuts.
Or they're gonna sign Michael Conforto, who hasn't played in over a year, something like that.
Yeah.
Could you guys see Gallo be even worse than how Dunn was?
Oh my God, it's. I looked Gallo up the other day on Baseball Reference. Like, he hasn't been good for like he had a good year, a bad year, a good year, and then a whole stretch of really bad years. Like, it's
Yeah.
Been like 3 years since he's been anything.
You know it's gonna happen though, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
I
You know
don't
it's
know
gonna
if it's a foregone conclusion, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And right field has been like a black hole ever since Avi left. And I just don't understand why they keep going after these players like Mazzara or Gallo or whatever. It's just, I mean, yeah, they got Pollock, and Pollock really didn't play all that well, even though the thought process was right. But at the same point, it's just like, why do these things keep happening?
Shout out to AJ Pollock, by the way, for opting out. Thanks, buddy.
Actually, that was
that
helpful. That really helpful.
Yeah. Well, it just goes back to them, just like, they don't shop at Macy's. They keep shopping at TJ Maxx for their free agents. And like, yeah, when you spend 5 million, 7 million, like on 1 year stopgap types, like, and then we couldn't have seen that they're bad. Like, yeah, this is your fault. Like, spend for talent or get crappy results out of not so good players. Like, there's a reason why you're able to get so-and-so Adam Eaton, like washed Adam Eaton again for 1 year and for whatever reason, 7.5
And they signed him in the first week of December.
Yeah.
Literally one of the first free agent outfielders off the board was Adam Eaton that year. Like, there was no reason to do it. If it's February, sure, go for it, man. Like, whatever. But it was December.
It's just the risk aversion that they have is like an organization to just not, to not want to go into the deep end with some higher price, but higher end talent. It's, they get their guys, they, lock some of them in, and then it's like, okay, so how do we do this in the most monetarily efficient way possible? And like, and that's the thing is like some people I see like to argue is like, oh, they, they're, the team kind of acts like they're in a small market, but they're in Chicago, and then, they don't have the attendance, whatever, this, that. But it's like, if you sign a premier free agent and that juices the fan base, like, fans will buy tickets, they'll buy merch, they come to the park, they buy concessions, like, so you're getting the return on the investment that way. When you spend like a prospect capital. I mean, if that's what you want to call Steele Walker in this case, but you trade for Nomar Mazara, if you sign Adam Eaton, if you plug and play John Jay out there, like
Extend Lurie Garcia.
Nobody's excited for that. Like that just keeps, you're just spinning the wheels, you're just going along the road. Like you're gonna see some return. Like with the Padres going nuts, like how can they do this? Like, oh, their attendance is good. Their attendance is good because they have a team that they spend money on, and people are enthused to come to the park. Like I don't know why this doesn't make sense.
And there's money coming off the board again for the Padres too, because next year and the year after, they got a couple of big contracts from guys that they don't really, they're very useful right now. They don't really need to keep them for much longer, that they can use that money again to spend on a Juan Soto extension or whatever. There's a very healthy financial model there. Meanwhile, the White Sox, we saw it on Twitter yesterday again, we have to talk about whether or not the White Sox should trade Tim Anderson midway through the 2023 season at the deadline if they're not running away with the division, because there's no way in hell they're going to extend him.
Yeah. And like, it even gets to the point, like, should they extend, will they and should they? At that point, it's probably two different arguments, but like, we know they won't.
Right.
Like,
well, look at Bogart's getting 11 years. Turner getting 11 years. Yeah. All 30 years old, 29, 30 years old. Tim Anderson is 29, 30 years old by the time his contract runs out. There's no way they're going to give him an 11-year deal.
No.
Yeah. So it's, it's like, do you just like, if he has a good year and Colson keeps developing and like the Sox are still sitting 500, do you just trade him for assets and, go from there because they're not going to do it. And like, that's the part of, they like to act like they're in this small market, but they get none of the benefits. We
shouldn't be talking. We shouldn't be forced to talk about that. We should be. Exactly. We should be talking about, holy hell! Look at this team. Look at the roster we right now have. Look at how good this can be. Look at how excited we're all. Nobody's excited. Like, we as a fan base are so incredibly depressed and upset. Like, this is not the kind of stuff we should be talking about. We should be looking at this roster going like, oh my God, how did we ever get all these players to play for the White Sox? And how many more World Series are we going to win? Like, this is just nuts, man. It makes me so upset. James, why did I say yes to your invitation?
Hey, at least we can all be positive about what Dylan Cease did this last season.
Yeah, there we go.
And think about how in 2 seasons he won't be here anymore because he's going to sign for $200 million somewhere else.
Yep.
Yeah. And the Sox will be scared to offer him a qualifying offer because he might accept. Like that kind of. It's just like, it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps things up. I think it's getting so depressing. It's like, okay, we got to cut off somewhere.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a good therapy session though.
Yeah, I needed that. I needed to get some vocal frustrations out. I do feel better. I mean, right now.
I'm going to get drunk.
Well, luckily for you, it's many hours past where we're at. So
yes.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. I think Jasper can understand this joke a little bit. Me being an Everton fan, just how like kind of similar to the White Sox, where they have all this high talent and then they just kind of struggle and meander in the Premier League. But on our back of our shirts, it says #group therapy.
There you go.
And literally, I mean, when we all get together, we're just like, all right, how are we going to be depressed today?
We haven't even talked about the minor leagues at all. And you got 3 people on your panel here who watch pretty much like a lot of minor leagues, and that's basically our niche in this whole White Sox Twitter or like podcast atmosphere. We haven't even talked about the minor leagues.
Actually, you know what? I think that's a good idea. Maybe next week we'll just have to do one just on the minor leagues. Would you guys be up for that?
I'm fine with that.
That'd be probably more uplifting.
So I'll certainly be happier.
All right. Yeah. Well,
I always really enjoy listening to Steve and Ian talk about the minors. So I would love to be a part of it.
Well, then I think that's a perfect podcast to do next week. But I think this has been a pretty solid one. I think we can do a lot more of these as the off season goes, and we'll see. Thanks a lot, guys. I mean, this has been a lot of fun and depressing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for putting me in an alcohol state of mind.
All right, and as for my name is James Rowe, Jasper Rose, Ian Eskridge, and his name is actually Steve Hasman, but we're going to call him Sleepy Harold. Thanks a lot, guys.